Hey there, my name is Shello D. Collier, and I'm the founder and CEO of Black Women Invest. And I'm here to close the wealth gap for Black women. So I want to welcome you back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking with Emmanuel Mate-Kole from M&O Law Consult in Accra, Ghana. And we're specifically talking about real estate law in Ghana. So I know this is a very popular topic because many of you probably have questions regarding what's the law look like for foreigners? How can we protect ourselves? And so we'll talk all about that so that you guys have a very clear understanding of everything you need to know regarding the legal process of buying real estate in Ghana. So Emmanuel, welcome.
Yes, thank you very much, Hello.
Awesome. It's great having you. I know that many people have questions regarding the law and what the process is. So do you first want to start off by just sharing a little bit more about yourself and what you help others
absolutely.
do?
Thank you very much. So the full name is Emmanuel Sakite Mate-Kole. Sakite is like my local name.
Okay.
And I'm 14 years qualified. I've been practicing real estate law for 14 years. I have a law firm in Accra, Ghana called M&O Law Consults. And I've assisted clients during this period to basically conduct due diligence on land. I've prepared legal documents and I've assisted them to register their lands. And I also do conduct litigation sometimes.
Oh, okay. We don't like to hear that. But I mean, it happens, right?
Yes, it does. It does.
So it's good to know that you guys are full service.
Yes, full service law firm. So I specialize in real estate, but I have some other lawyers who work for me who do other areas of practice, who are in other areas of practice.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice, nice. So for a foreigner who wants to buy real estate or wants to buy land, what does that process typically look like?
All right. So for a foreigner, first of all, I'd like to say that foreigners can buy land in Ghana.
Okay.
Yes, so that's a question that keeps coming up. But for a foreigner who wants to buy land in Ghana, what I would encourage you to do is, first of all, work with professionals. So we have the professionals that we have in this chain are surveyors. So surveyors are those who go and pick the plan of the land, and then you can use that to do a search. I also recommend use a valuer, because a valuer could tell you or will tell you what the value of your land is. And then, more importantly, a lawyer. And the reason why I will place emphasis on this is because a lot of people are scammed because they do not use lawyers. Yeah. So once you have these professionals, then I believe you are ready to acquire land in Ghana. And the first process is the pre-closing stage. At the pre-closing stage, you are required to do due diligence on the land. And then you are required to ensure that the documents are properly prepared by a lawyer, because in Ghana, it's only a lawyer that can prepare a conveyance. Because of the kind of problems that come up. So we have designed a system where it's an escrow system where the clients do not have to transfer money directly to the seller. We are trying to encourage a system where the money is given to the lawyer and the lawyer transacts with the seller's lawyer.
Perfect.
So that, there's no exchange between the buyer and the seller directly. So we have introduced an escrow system. So in this escrow system, we have a building inspector, a valuer, and a surveyor. And even sometimes you have real estate brokers in there. And all these people are paid from the escrow accounts. So if the funds hit the escrow account and a valuer has to perform a function, the funds are released from the escrow account to the valuer to do that. And then we give out a statement called a settlement statement, detailing what the monies have been used for. So this is something that we have recently introduced. Escrow is not new, but I'm just saying that this system is a system that we've recently introduced by my law firm, and we have used that successfully to assist clients purchase properties in Ghana.
Yeah. I mean, that's great because that's very familiar for many people, and they feel things are safe.
Yes.
And I know that a lot of people experience scams. And so I'm just going to dive right into that, right? Because a lot of people are getting scammed out of their money. And this is not just for foreigners, but also for actual Ghanaians as well.
Yes.
And so it sounds like a lot of this happens when people aren't doing their due diligence and they aren't doing this process.
Absolutely.
My thought process is like, I wouldn't do that in the States, right? Somebody comes to me and says, hey, I have land for sale. I have this property for sale. Here you go, right? Here's this piece of paper that proves I'm the owner. And what many people do is they trust, for whatever reason, that what the person is saying is true, and they do that exchange. So I love that you guys are introducing the escrow process. But do you have like some stories of people, some nightmare stories that you want to share of things that have happened?
Yes, I do. I have many nightmare stories.
Okay.
And I would like to start by saying that, in the US and maybe in some other developed jurisdictions, you have the lawyer leading the transaction. So you have a lawyer leading the transaction. So, basically, the lawyer is supposed to follow a certain process, and the lawyer is also responsible if they give you negligent advice. All right. But our experience in Ghana is the total opposite, and that's what we are trying to change. In Ghana, you have other people leading the process. So in some cases, you have a land agent who is assisting you to acquire land, or you even have the seller who is assisting the buyer to acquire the seller's land, or in some cases, you even have surveyors doing the legal documentation, etc., which tends to be problematic in most cases. So yes, I've had some horror stories. One of them that I remember was a foreigner who came to me, I think just after COVID, and said that he transferred, I think, $600,000 of his retirement money to some guy he spoke with on Zoom.
Oh, come on.
During COVID in Ghana, and the guy promised to build him to buy land, build him a house, and all that stuff. So he came to me, and I asked him, "What are your documents?" He had an MOU with this Ghanaian guy, where the Ghanaian guy had told him that he cannot own land in Ghana, so the documentation should be in the Ghanaian's name.
Oh,
yeah,
oh
I mean,
gosh.
so it was pathetic. So eventually, we had to start from scratch. I had to go onto the land to get a surveyor to do a survey of the land. I did a search on the land, found out who the owner is, and then I had to basically make inquiries to find out about this owner. So we found this owner somewhere after a while, and then we managed to engage him, and then we did the documentation with him, and then I registered the land in his name. So right now, he has registered the entire land. It's about 4 acres of land, and he's registered the entire land in his name, and then he says he wants to sue the guy who defrauded him. So we are in court as we speak. I got him a building inspector who did the inspection of the building. So the Ghanaian built the house, but there were some shortfalls. So we got a building inspector, because I told him you can't go to court without documentation to show that there are problems, there are defects. So we had to get a building inspector to identify the defects, and then we went to court. He said that he transferred our 600,000. The guy didn't render accounts, so the court made an order that we get a quantity surveyor to basically assess the assets and give us an estimate of how much money was used in building it.
Wow.
In order for the court to ascertain how much is owed him, if any. So we are at the trial stage. But I mean, he's happy because he has his documentation now, which is registered in his name, African American guy. So yeah, he's happy, but we are still in court.
It's $600,000 plus legal fees now.
Yeah.
And it's something that could have been avoided had you.
And he
done
didn't
due
have
diligence.
anything when he came to me. $600,000 was spent, and he didn't have a
Any
dime.
proof?
Nothing to show that he had acquired land in Ghana.
Wow.
Nothing at all. We had to start from the beginning, from scratch.
Why do you think people make this mistake?
It's based on trust. I mean, they feel like Ghanaians are easygoing and they feel maybe their laws do not work in Ghana. I mean, that's their perception, but they feel the laws do not work. They feel they can't get away with anything, and for that reason, they think Ghana is a different place, and anything can pass. Yeah. So that's what I think.
I think so too. Just the perception that, well, is Ghana's system as organized as us? Because right now with the legal documentation, it's not like we can go online and look up who owns pieces of land, right? I can't do that. Not yet, at least.
But there's a system, there's a registry which has a recording of everybody's land ownership in Ghana.
Yes.
So if you go to this registry and you do a search, it will give you a history of all the transactions on that particular piece of land. So it's not like that information is not available.
Right, but I have to go in person?
You have to know, you can engage, that's what you can engage the service of a lawyer. So when they say due diligence, due diligence is basically your investigation and your analysis of the information you come across in order to give advice, proper advice to the clients, which will aid them in, the land acquisition process. So the investigation is doing the searches, and then I have to analyze it. Analyzing is where I see the searches and then I ask questions. So I'm like, okay, so when did you guys buy the land? They tell me, they give me an answer. I'm like, so who did you buy the land from? And who did that person buy the land from? Now, note that in Ghana and any other jurisdictions, land transactions, you do not have title insurance for them. So you have to be aware of defective titles. So in order for you to safeguard yourself against defective titles, you have to go to the antecedent transactions. You have to go back to see what transactions transpired in the past, and to confirm whether those transactions were done in accordance with law. Because if those transactions were not done in accordance with law, it will affect the present day's transaction.
Wow. Yeah.
That is the due diligence. So when I see the search and I compare it to the seller's story, then I'm confirming whether indeed these transactions were done in accordance with law. Because in Ghana, for instance, the way you prepare your deed shows whether you can make your transaction valid or invalid. So there's a provision on how to execute the deed, or who can execute a deed. So if the person is an illiterate, for instance, you need the person to put their thumbprint on there, and there must be a clause where a witness will state that I have read the contents of this document to Shello, and she seemed to understand the contents before she put a thumbprint on there. If this statement is not there, the document is not valid.
Wow. Okay.
And also depending on the person you are buying the land from, if the person is a family is like, or a clan, a community or a family that owns land, then the head of family must sign with all the principal members of the family signing as well. So if you have one principal member not signing, it renders the document invalid.
Wow.
Yes. If you have a stew, which is a kingdom, which is led by a king, the chief or the regent has to sign the document with the consent and concurrence of the principal elders of the stew. All of them. Otherwise, the document is not valid. So execution itself, execution itself is just one aspect of the documentation, but that can render the document invalid.
Yeah.
Now the rule is that a conveyance or a transfer must be in writing, and it must be signed by the grantor and the grantor's witnesses, and witnessed by the grantor's witness, and then also must be signed by the grantee and witnessed by the grantee's witnesses. Now, when they say writing in Ghana, it doesn't literally simply mean literal writing. No, it means the document must have the names of the parties, the amount of money or the purchase price. It must have a description of the land. It must have an approved site plan. Yes, it must have the oath of proof and oath of execution. So the point is, it's just virtually impossible for you to get it right if you do not use a professional.
Right. Of course. I mean, literally all these things that you're sharing, I didn't know, right?
Yes.
Someone wouldn't know that you need this many people to sign
Good.
and to
So
put fingerprints
that
and
is
everything.
just definition of a conveyance. It's a document in writing which is signed by the witness and the the grantor and the grantor's witness, grantor and grantee's witness. In cases where there's a power of attorney, for instance, it says that the attorney must sign in the name in his own name, or he can also sign in the name of the principal and refer to the power in the document. So if you don't follow this procedure, there's a problem. There's one essential thing also. So when they say conveyance in law, it actually means a transfer of a person's interest to another person. So in Ghana, we have different interests in land. We have allodial interest, which is the highest. We have freehold interest, which is ownership forever. We have leasehold interest, and then we have tenancy.
Yeah.
Now, the person who is conveying to you must have an interest. So you cannot just be taking conveyances from people.
Okay.
If we say interest, we mean an interest which is recognized by the law. So you can't just go to anybody and say, I want to buy land, and you don't know the person's interest, and then you are just taking documents from the person when you don't know what interest they have in law.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Oh
know?
my gosh.
Yeah,
There's so many different elements.
Yeah.
To consider.
So I mean, you can I can't teach you all the rules, but this is just to let you know that it is a technical area, and you need a specialist to assist you. And the challenge that I have been having, and that is why I've had, I've done a lot of litigation successfully. And the biggest challenge I've had is clients will come to me. Some of them, are about to lose their land. I'll give you an example. I had this big client come to me, big guy. He came to me. He said government has given his land to someone, huge land, given his land to someone, sold it to someone, and the person had entered the land, broken his wall, and was building. So, and this happened recently. And what happened? I went through his documents. I realized that he didn't have good documents.
Oh man.
Yes, and that is how come government was able to give it to somebody, because you have to go and register with the Lands Commission.
Yeah.
You are on this huge acre of land. You haven't registered with the Lands Commission. You've walled it and you say it is yours. And Lands Commission will not know that you have land there if you don't register it. So they gave it to somebody else, and the person forcefully entered the land. So we had to go to court, and the guy needed an injunction. Otherwise, the people were going to build on his land. So we had to go to court, and I had to try and use all these legal arguments to get the injunction. Thankfully, I was able to get the injunction, and the court even made a further order that the people should remove their building materials and their workers from the land at their own cost. But if he had come to see me, it would have gotten to this point.
Yeah.
So when clients approach us to fix something, it's like it's gotten out of hand. And I also can't go to court and start attacking a client's documents, saying that, oh, your documents are problematic, you should have done A, B, C, D, E. So I pretend to be blind to those things. I pretend not to see. But meanwhile, I can see all the errors in my client's documents. But I have to pretend, because once I identify them, or even if the other person has done a similar mistake, I cannot mention it. Because if I do, the other lawyer will use it against me.
Yeah, sure.
So that's the predicament we find ourselves in. I think that this can be avoided if, both foreigners and Ghanaians alike, just use professionals from the beginning.
Right. No, agreed.
It makes it too complicated for everybody.
Yeah, agreed. I think just stick to the process. It's the same process back home in the U.S. Don't come here with a different energy trying to cut corners and find shortcuts. Just do what you're supposed to do and pay the fees for the attorney. So I actually want to circle back, because you mentioned early on that foreigners cannot own land here, and so the system here for the most part is leasehold, and it's my understanding that different families tend to own different regions of land, and so you are essentially leasing from them. Then there's also government owned land, which is typically within the capital And then maybe bigger cities have government on land, right?
So most of the lands in Ghana are stool lands. So when I say stool, I mean a kingdom.
Yes.
You know, most of them are stool lands. And then we also have family lands. And then we have individuals who own lands.
Okay,
and
so
we have
stool land and family land are different.
stool land, they are different.
Okay.
Yes. So other you know, in Ghana, our customary laws also coexist with the statutory laws. And under our customary law, if a person settles in an area and reduces that portion into their possession, it becomes theirs.
Okay.
So out of the kingdom, families could decide that, look, this area we are going to cultivate this land. And after a while, it becomes theirs because they have a right as indigents to own land, you know, customarily. So that is how come families also have land. Now, an individual in that family can also decide that, look, let me go and settle in this area. I'm tired of hanging out with these people, settle in this area and do my own cultivation.
Okay.
And then that individual also acquires an interest in the land. And this interests are freehold interests. All these interests are freehold interests.
Okay.
All right. So that's how come kingdoms, families, and individuals have land.
Yes.
Now, as for government, theirs is compulsory acquisition. They take it by force.
Okay.
You know, so they pass a law, they take the land, and then they pay you compensation. Yes.
Yeah, like eminent domain, essentially.
Right of
maybe-
eminent domain.
Right. Okay. And
Yeah,
they're
right of
typically using
eminent
it for the development of the country, or
Well,
for personal use.
the purpose is to acquire the land, make it public land for the benefit of everybody. You know, but the rule is that if they cannot use it for the purpose for which it was acquired, they have to return it to the original owners.
Okay.
So even government makes mistakes because after a while, if they're not able to use it for the purpose for which they acquired it, they don't return them. And in that case, you can even sue. No, but that is why the laws are there.
Yeah.
You can sue the government to return the land and also to pay you compensation.
Yeah.
Do you get
rightfully
me?
so, of
Yes. Because you see, the case that I was talking to you about, the one where the government gave the land to a third party, when my client was in possession of the land. The reason why the court gave the injunction was that I indicated to the court that the Lands Commission should have used a process. They should have given the person notice, and after 21 days, if the person doesn't move or vacate the property, they should evict the person forcefully.
Right.
So you cannot be giving grants when you haven't evicted the person in possession. They didn't follow that procedure, and that is how come the courts saw it fit to give an injunction.
Okay.
So even the Lands Commission are subject to the law.
Yeah.
And that's one thing about Ghana is that, in my experience, the law works. It works amazingly.
Yeah.
You know, there's so many stories, war stories I have, and maybe if we have time, I'll share some with you.
But no, I mean, it's great that these things are in place to protect people. So what about foreigners, right? So it sounds like you have quite a bit of experience with foreigners. I actually brought in a group of women who purchased and are using Emmanuel's services as well.
Yeah.
And so any advice that you have for, do you have any advice for foreigners specifically, in addition to what you've already shared, but do you have any specific advice?
Well, I mean, for foreigners, first of all, they can acquire land in Ghana.
So leasehold.
Leasehold, yes,
right, okay.
leasehold. And they can have a maximum of 50 years at one time.
Yes.
When I say 50 years at one time, what it means is that after the 50 years has expired, you have to ask for a renewal.
Right.
Now, in most cases, I prefer that the renewal is stated in the lease, in the existing lease.
Makes sense, yeah.
Yes, so if we sign a lease agreement, in that same lease, I want you to add that I have a right of maybe another 50-year renewal, and the terms and conditions of the renewal must also be clear from the existing lease.
So including the financial terms.
Everything.
Okay.
Because I want it to be predictable.
Okay.
So that we know whether we can afford it in 50 years or not. If it's not affordable in 50 years, then maybe if it's a legacy you want to leave, then you go and look for something else. You know what I mean? But the fact is, ensure that everything is clear. Nothing is vague from the onset. So you get a 50-year lease, and then you get an option to renew for another 50 years with the terms and conditions indicated clearly.
And so would you say that's another mistake that foreigners make, not knowing the importance of like putting the future details in that lease agreement?
And a foreigner cannot have a freehold interest in Ghana if you are given a freehold, because you go to some of these families and then they say, I have a freehold interest, I'm willing to assign everything to you, and they take out your dollars and you give it to them. They'll give you a document assigning their interest to you, but that document, that freehold, that transfer document is void.
Wow.
Yes.
So I have to be a citizen.
Even if you're a citizen, the law now is that you cannot have a freehold interest in stool, clan, family land.
Okay. But government land.
You cannot even have a freehold interest in government land, because government will not give you a freehold interest.
Okay,
They won't give it to you in the first place.
Okay.
You know.
So that's so interesting. So even if I become a citizen, in what case will I be able to have it? Maybe my children, if they were born in Ghana?
It's also in the law. Like I said, our law is pluralistic because we operate the constitution. We have a constitution, we have the statutes, we have the common law, and we have the customary law.
Y'all better get y'all an attorney, okay? Because he's breaking things down, and if you miss this, you will really mess around and mess with your money, okay?
Yeah. And the customary law also coexists with these other laws. Now, under our customary law, like I told you earlier on, a person can settle in an area and reduce that area into their possession, and after a while it becomes theirs. So the law provides for an interest called usufructory interest. It's a freehold interest, but it's a freehold interest which is carved out by somebody who is an indigene of a community, who has settled and appropriated a portion of the land into their possession, and therefore they have a freehold interest. So
they register that.
And they have to register it. So if they don't register it and you come and see me, for instance, I will tell you, let's try and register this person's usufructory interest. And if that person gives you, because you're a foreigner, so you can't have it, but assuming you're a Ghanaian, that person can give you a usufructory interest, because the prohibition is on what? Stool, clan, family lands, but not individual lands.
Oh, okay.
You get me? Now, another way of acquiring it also, if you're not an indigene, is that you have to be resident in the area for 50 years. And if you're resident there for 50 years, it means that you are not under a lease, or you're not there at the instance of somebody. You just be resident there, at your own will, or your own will for that number of years. Then you can now claim a usufructory interest. So it's not only indigenes who can have it, Ghanaians, and I would say foreigners too, because you see, they say foreigners, you cannot claim, you cannot convey, because every time there's a law, you must know that there are loopholes too. So yes, if the law is silent on usufructory interest for foreigners, but assuming a foreigner comes to live in Ghana, and a foreigner settles on an area where there's no, they don't ask anybody for permission, they're just living there for a period of 50 years, they can actually go and register usufructory interest, because there's evidence to show that they've been there for 50 years. You get me?
And I feel like that's fair, right? If nobody came knocking to say, what are you doing on my land?
Exactly. So that is how
it's risky,
it works.
But
it's not, it's not impossible, but it's very unlikely. Because almost all areas in Ghana have owners. Almost all lands in Ghana have owners now.
Can you elaborate a little bit?
There's no area that...
So the owners are keeping track, though, right?
They should. But if they are not keeping track, then it means that somebody can claim another interest, which, the law will recognize. But they should be keeping track.
And one thing that you shared was, even for someone who holds a leasehold agreement. So let's say I've been in this area for 15 plus years, or actually it's at least 12 years.
Yes.
And I'm walking around claiming like this is my land. I'm acting like this is my land and I'm doing what I want on my land, even though I have a leasehold agreement with that landlord, right? So if the landlord essentially doesn't make certain claims, and I don't know what that would necessarily look like, then they
So
can.
if you have good, that's a good question. I like that.
Okay. Well, you knew where I was
you're
going with
right.
this.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So you have a leasehold interest with a landlord. You have a leasehold agreement, a leasehold with a landlord, and you choose not to obey the leasehold because it's a contract, and a contract you have obligations. The landlord has obligations towards the tenant has obligations towards the landlord.
And what does that typically look like for a land?
So the obligations are, for instance, the landlord's obligations are that one, the tenant will have quiet enjoyment of the land, which means that I'm not going to disturb you, you're also not going to disturb me, you're just going to enjoy your land, peaceful, quiet possession. The landlord is going to do everything in their power to ensure that the tenant has a good title to the land. The landlord will ensure that the obligations in the head lease, which is the lease that came before the landlord's title, he's going to respect that, because if he doesn't respect it, it will affect you.
Okay.
So these are some of the landlord's covenants. Now the tenant's covenants are that one, I'm going to pay you rent.
Yeah.
So the tenant refuses to pay rent, then it means that now the tenant is becoming an adverse possessor of the land. Mind you, it's not adverse owner, it's adverse possessor.
Let's say if the owner, time is passing and that tenant is no longer paying, but the owner doesn't enforce the lease, then can that tenant now like get some sort of right? Because we do have those like
squatters' rights. That's what I'm
Right.
saying. So if you have a tenant, the thing about land ownership is you have to be vigilant. So if you have a tenant who is not paying rent, then and you refuse to ask them to pay rent, then it means you have slept on your rights. You waive your right to collect rent.
Yeah.
And if after 12 years you do not collect rent, your statute is barred from collecting rent from them, because clearly you have not demonstrated that you want your property back.
Yeah.
But if a tenant is not paying rent, the first thing the landlord ought to do is that the landlord ought to demand for the rent. And if the tenant continues to fail to pay rent, then you go to court and have the tenant evicted.
Yeah, that's the proper way to
that's
do
what
it,
you should do. Yes, but if you don't do it and the tenant is doing what he or she wants on the property, then the tenant will now craft a new interest, which will rival your interest. So if you have a freehold interest and the tenant is exercising adverse rights, which contradict your interest, then the tenant is also carving out a freehold interest for themselves.
Wow.
Yes, because now they're rivaling you.
Yeah, even if I'm a foreigner. I mean,
I don't think that the law anticipates foreigners having freehold.
okay.
I'm just trying to show you some ways in which the law has been silent so you can take advantage of it. But it's also quite unlikely that a foreigner can just come and settle somewhere in Ghana and then all of a sudden, hey, 50 years, I'm now a freeholder. I mean, that time might come, but I don't see it. Yeah. I don't see it. Because there are people who also are in the community who also want to use the land, and I don't think they'll allow a foreigner to just
you can't hide for 50 years too,
exactly.
right? Like people definitely spot you.
People will spot you.
Okay. Wow, that's quite a bit to consider.
Yeah.
Okay. What are some common scams that you're finding people are experiencing when they're coming to purchase? And then the part two of that is that typically for land acquisition, or is it also for purchasing these apartments that we're seeing people are buying?
Well, I mean, look, the first thing I see is that people make representations in documents that are not true. So, for instance, you have a document which is reciting a judgment, for instance. Meanwhile, the judgment does not cover the land in question, the subject matter that you want to buy. But the person has referenced a judgment. So if you give it to a lawyer and the lawyer does not do a thorough due diligence and the lawyer just relies on the judgment, then it means that you are relying on it to your detriment. Because you see, let me just give you this so that you know how technical this thing is. if a judgment gives you good title in Ghana,
Okay.
but that judgment that will give you good title must follow a certain requirement. It must have certain things. The judge must state in the judgment the interest that the person has, the judgment's creditor or the person who won the case. The judge must state the interest that the person has. Then the judgment plan must be signed by the judge and the registrar of the courts before that judgment can be plotted. So now if you go and find a judgment which has been plotted and which somebody is relying on, which doesn't state the interest the person has, and it doesn't have all these other things, you can apply for the judgment to be expunged from the record. Yes. So that's why it's important for you to do due diligence, because any little problem can cause, any little thing or omission can cause a big problem for you. Because assuming you go and rely on this judgment, and then I see that all of these things have not been met, and I say it should be expunged, then it means that, and you also cannot show that you did your due diligence, then it means that you lost your land.
Wow.
Yes, that's what happens.
Yeah, it's a common
And
scam.
that is why you need to get a lawyer from the beginning.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you've given more than enough reason as to why we need to have a lawyer, because there's so many different laws that you just don't know. You don't know what to look for, and you don't know if something would disqualify the paperwork. So when it comes to these types of issues, are you finding it most common with land versus,
Well,
because I can
most of
imagine an experienced developer who is, basically buying land that they really don't own, right? Or acquiring land that they really don't own and then building on it and then selling units. I don't foresee that being an issue.
I have sued even developers.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, for doing the wrong thing.
Meaning they don't own.
Yes.
Or they have the ability to sell.
Well, you see, you must have an interest in the land. So there's a case that I did where, in one case where I realized that the antecedent documents were registered, but the person who transferred to the developer's interest was not registered.
Okay.
So Mr. A, the antecedent documents are Mr. A is the head lessor, Mr. B is the head lessee. That's like the first transaction.
Okay.
That is registered. Then the transaction that followed after that, Mr. B transfers to Mr. C. That is registered. Now Mr. C transfers to the developer. Mr. C's title is not registered and transfers to the developer. Yet, by some magic, the developer has been able to register.
Interesting.
And the law is that you cannot transfer a valid title if it is not registered.
Yeah, makes sense.
You get me? So what that means is that whatever interest the developer has is void.
It's void, yeah.
Yes. So I had to sue the developer to get their documents in order. And that's not the only one. I've done other cases like that where I've had to sue the developers to get their documentation in order. Because if your documentation is problematic and you pass it on to the purchaser, the purchaser will have a defective title.
Wow.
Yeah.
And many people don't know this until maybe after their transaction.
Yeah, after the transaction, they've lived in the property for years, and then subsequently there's a challenge, and then they find out that.
And imagine a whole building of people who now realize like this was everybody's issue.
Yes, and the rule is buyer beware. So the law will not reward you for being reckless. You'll be punished.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So even when it comes to purchasing properties with or through a developer, you're suggesting to use an attorney in that case. Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Well, that's attorney throughout.
Yeah, throughout the entire process. Okay. Yeah. That's very
I mean,
important.
look, even the
lands. Keep stressing
that.
that.
Yeah, the Lands Commission is the government institution that basically signs leases on behalf of government. They also have an extra role of keeping records of all transactions on land, and even they are subject to the law. Even they make mistakes, and they are punished.
Yeah.
So, let alone developers and individuals. I mean,
yeah.
Yeah.
What are the legal structures of a joint venture in real estate? Can someone grab a partner and say, okay, we're going to buy and rent this place out? So just kind of want to get an understanding of who can purchase with who.
Well, I mean, with a joint venture, what in my experience, what I've seen happening here is that the two parties, one is bringing land, one is bringing money, and they decide on how it is going to be split. In such a situation, I advise the clients that look, there must be a basis for the negotiation. So if somebody is bringing land, let's get a valuer to value the land. And then we'll know, okay, this land is $20,000. If somebody is bringing money, how much is the person bringing? Let's say it's also $20,000. So what that means is that then it means that it must be a 50-50 split.
Okay.
All right. Yeah. So that is the arrangement. There are also instances where maybe you have an SPV, that's a special purpose vehicle. So both parties decide that, look, let's enter into an agreement where we are going to set up a company. And this company is going to be a developer. It's going to build and sell. And after that, the company will be dissolved. So that's what we call a special purpose vehicle. In such instances too, they have to set out the shareholding structure.
Okay.
You know.
So in the case of a project like those, can a foreigner be a part of that transaction?
Absolutely, yes.
So
absolutely.
Are foreigners limited? From my understanding, foreigners are limited in business, starting a business within the country. Is that true?
Oh, what kind of limitation are you talking about?
So do we have to have a Ghanaian as a partner in order for us to start a business?
No, I understand what you're talking about. So there's the Ghana Investment Promotion Center Act, which says that if you are a foreigner and you come to Ghana to set up a business, you have to demonstrate that you have $500,000.
Okay.
You know, but that $500,000 is not money that you are giving to the government. It's money that is in the company's account, which the company can use however they deem fit.
Okay.
You get me? So
and that's for any type of business
foreigner.
Except real estate.
All business.
Even real estate.
Yes,
okay.
Even real estate.
Gotcha.
Yes, $500,000.
Okay. If we were developing.
There's only if you are trading, then it's $1 million. If you are trading.
Okay.
But if you fall within the exceptions, which is, but obviously there are businesses that are reserved for Ghanaians. You know, so those ones you cannot get into them unless you become a citizen.
Okay.
Then you can now, and then there will be no need for you to bring that $500,000 and all that stuff.
Okay.
But if you are a foreigner, even from Nigeria, you have to meet this minimum capital requirement.
Okay.
So, and then if you join with a Ghanaian, the Ghanaian must have at least 10% of the shareholding, and then you are allowed to bring the minimum capital down to $200,000.
Oh, okay. That's the rule. Yes. So, I don't know if this is true or not. Maybe we can cut this out. But I once heard that, or is it true that a man and a woman cannot purchase a property together unless they're married?
Oh, no, it's not true.
Okay.
It's not true.
Right, so I was wondering that because
I haven't come across any law like that. However, what the law says...
Or what about getting financed? Is that what it is?
No, what the law says is that if you are married and you buy property and it is in your name, assuming that I'm married and I buy property and it's in my name, I'm deemed to be holding it in trust for both of us.
Okay.
So it means that if you are entering into a transaction with a married person, you have to be careful to secure the signature of the spouse.
Okay.
Because if you go and secure only one person's signature and the transaction is challenged by the other party, the transaction can be set aside.
Yeah. And even if it's recorded as just one party signing, you want to make sure that
you get the other person to sign also.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So when you are purchasing land or property in Ghana and you're married, it's best to make sure that both people sign that document. But either way, both people own it. And whereas in the U.S. it's very different. I can buy my own, depending on the state, I can buy my own property and it's mine.
Okay.
So that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, but the rule is that unless a contrary intention appears in the document, so assuming that the documentation which did the transfer says that, you know, maybe this transaction, you have an agreement with your wife that you're not going to split anything. I mean, you have your own, what do you guys call in the US? I've forgotten the name. Is it prenup or something?
Yeah,
if you have your own agreements, which you can reference in the contract, that look, we have an agreement that my individual property is mine, hers is hers, that kind of thing, then you can rely on that to say that you don't have that obligation. But if you do, in the absence of such a thing,
and you got to register that prenup or something.
Well, no, but it's an agreement which you can reference in your deed.
Okay.
That
Perfect,
this is the arrangement that you have, and so I'm referring to this arrangement and saying that, based on this arrangement that I have with this person, this property is not going to be split. We don't share. We don't own it joint. We don't own it as tenants in common.
Gotcha. Yeah. Wow. So many.
But there's one thing that came to mind right now. So for non-citizens to, you can use a company to become a citizen. So the rule is that if you set up a company and more than 40% is owned by a citizen, a non-citizen, then the company is a foreigner. But if you have a company where you have majority partners Ghanaians, so let's say 61% Ghanaian ownership, then the company is a citizen. Does it make sense? So if you can set up a company and have 39% foreigners, 61% Ghanaians. I'm talking about 61% interest belonging to a Ghanaian, 39% interest belonging to a foreigner. Then that company is now a citizen. So that company now can benefit from everything that a citizen can benefit from.
Interesting. But can I become a citizen, or just basically my
if you can,
through my business?
Yes, through your business.
Okay.
So that if you don't have time to do your citizenship now, your business can be a citizen for you.
Okay.
You can benefit from all the things that citizens benefit from under our law.
Nice, including financing for your next properties, right?
Well, I mean, yes, if everything
under the
a citizen,
business,
everything a citizen is entitled to, you can, in terms of even the number of years you get on the lease and everything.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. Wow, that's great insight. You know, I've connected with Emmanuel through Seso Global, and I know that you work with them as well as multiple other real estate companies, right?
Yeah.
So when they bring in someone who is buying real estate and they introduce them to you, I guess you're just helping through the whole process.
Exactly.
Right?
That's what I do.
Yeah, that's great. Great partnership that y'all got going on. Great partnership that we have going on. Love it.
Yeah.
And you know, I want to thank you for joining. And I just want to know, what would you leave the audience with? What's one thing you want to leave the audience with?
Well, I mean, I always leave them with the same thing, that admonishment that, you know, when you are doing a real estate transaction in Ghana, you have to assume that the other party is dishonest or intends to defraud you. And it is the documentation that you are going to use to basically dispel that notion of fraud. If the documents are valid, if the documents are true, if the documents are speaking the truth based on your due diligence, then now I can say that, okay, this person is genuine.
Yeah,
but
guilty until proven innocent.
Exactly. Otherwise, you're guilty until proven innocent. That's how it is.
I like it. That's like words from an attorney right there, to make sure you don't get yourself in trouble. Okay, well, thank you for that. Thank you for joining. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. This was very insightful, and I hope that everyone who's listening takes this very seriously, and that you don't mess around with, you know, all these laws that are in place, that are really in place to protect you. So be sure to do your due diligence. Be sure to make sure that you connect with a qualified attorney. We're gonna leave Emmanuel's contact information in the description below. So make sure that you guys reach out to him for any needs that you have, and be sure to mention me, Black Women Invest, in your conversation with him. So thank you so much for joining, and I hope this was very helpful, very insightful. Cheers to you for closing the wealth gap more and more. See you guys next time.